In the early days of World War II, chaos swept through Europe as the Nazis expanded their control, bringing fear and destruction in their wake. In Poland, a young Jewish man named David faced this nightmare head-on. Many families, including his own, were forced to confront the harsh reality of life under Nazi occupation. David, however, was determined not to submit to the oppressive regime that threatened to erase his existence. David's life changed in the summer of 1939 when the sounds of war grew louder. He watched helplessly as soldiers marched through his town, their armbands signaling danger to him and his family. As the invasion began, people around him fled, scrambling for safety. David knew he had to escape before it was too late. One fateful night, under the cover of darkness, David took his chance. He packed a small bag with essentials, some clothes, a little food, and a few family photographs. Every item held memories of a life he was about to leave behind. With a heavy heart, he slipped out of his home, his mind racing with fear and uncertainty. As he made his way through the narrow streets, avoiding the main roads where Nazi patrols roamed, David felt a mix of hope and dread. He knew he couldn't go back. His family was still in the house, and he could only pray they would find a way to escape as well. He moved quickly, relying on every ounce of intuition to navigate through the familiar, yet increasingly hostile environment. Days turned into weeks, and David found himself hiding in the forests and abandoned buildings, trying to stay one step ahead of the Nazis. He met other people like him, those who had lost their homes, their families, and even their hope. They shared stories around small fires, comforting one another with tales of resilience and survival. David listened closely, realizing that each individual had their own battle to fight, but they all shared a common goal: to survive. One evening, while resting in an old barn, David overheard a conversation between two men. They spoke of the resistance movements forming and the possibility of crossing into nearby countries that still had freedom. This news ignited a spark of determination within him. He decided he would join others in the fight against the Nazis instead of simply hiding away. With newfound resolve, David made his way toward the border of Poland. The journey was fraught with danger. He had to sneak past checkpoints, often relying on the kindness of strangers who were willing to help a fellow human being in need. Some gave him food or directions, while others warned him of the Nazis' patrols. Along the way, David learned to trust his instincts and move silently, like a shadow in the night. As he traversed the countryside, David witnessed the devastating impact of the war. It was all around him. The world he knew was crumbling. Towns were destroyed, and people were living in constant fear. But within the destruction, he also saw acts of bravery. Families hiding others in their homes, people risking their lives to help those in danger. These glimpses of humanity inspired him, reinforcing his belief that hope still existed. David's journey was far from easy. He often faced hunger and extreme weather conditions as he moved stealthily through the elements, but every step was a step toward freedom. He was resilient, driven by the desire not only to save himself, but to keep alive the memory of his loved ones who remained behind. Each passing day added to his resolve. David became more than just a survivor. He was on a mission. Little did he know, the road ahead would be filled with both obstacles and unexpected alliances, shaping him into a key figure in a struggle that would test the limits of human endurance. David's journey through the forests of Eastern Europe was challenging yet vital for his survival. The thick, dark woods provided some cover from the Nazi patrols searching for people like him. Each step he took was filled with caution, as he learned to trust the whispers of the tall trees and the rustlings of the night. He relied heavily on underground networks, secret groups of people working to help others escape the Nazis. These brave individuals risked everything to protect those in need. David felt grateful to have found such allies, even if they were few and far between. Each time he met someone from the network, he felt a surge of hope, knowing there were still people willing to fight against the cruelty surrounding them. As he moved from one safe house to another, David learned the importance of stealth. He traveled mostly at night, when darkness engulfed the forests and masked his presence. During the day, he hid in small, abandoned cabins or thick brush, listening intently for any signs of danger. The quiet was sometimes deafening, filled with the thoughts of his family and the life he once had. Yet the fear of capture fueled his determination to keep moving. For weeks, he followed narrow paths, often marked only by the slightest disturbances in the undergrowth or faint trails left by others. He memorized every turn and landmark, so he wouldn't get lost in the vastness of the forest. At times, he felt like a ghost, fleeting through a world that had grown unrecognizable to him. Food was scarce, but the underground network often provided what they could. David learned to appreciate even the smallest meals, sharing whatever he had with others. Hunger gnawed at him, but the thought of being caught pushed him to endure. Each day without detection felt like a victory. Along the way, he encountered other escaped souls, each with their own stories of loss and hope. They shared laughter and tears around small fires in hidden clearings, forging bonds that made the burdens a little lighter. David realized they were all bound together by a shared desire to live freely, to return to their homes, and to rebuild their lives. One night, while resting in a secluded grove, David met a woman named Miriam, who was also on the run. She had a fierce spirit and a quick smile that reminded him of his childhood friends. They exchanged stories, finding comfort in their shared struggles. Miriam had connections in the resistance, and she spoke passionately about the fight against the Nazis. Her words ignited a fire within David. He wanted to do more than just survive. He wanted to make a difference, however small. As they traveled together, David felt a sense of partnership he hadn't expected. Miriam taught him how to be even more cautious, showing him hidden routes and ways to communicate without drawing attention. During their quiet moments, they discussed dreams of a future beyond the war, of a day when they could walk freely without fear. Each night spent in the forest clinging to hope made David stronger. He felt the weight of his mission grow heavier, but he also understood the importance of resilience. He was no longer just running away. He was part of something bigger, a movement of many who would not let hate prevail. As David continued his journey, he knew challenges lay ahead. The forests, while offering shelter, were also a place of uncertainty. Yet with every step he took, along those discreet paths under the cover of night, he felt a little closer to freedom and a little closer to fulfilling his purpose. Despite David's cautious approach, the threat of capture was always looming. The Gestapo, the Nazi secret police, had intensified their search for escaped Jews and resistance members. Their presence was felt everywhere, spreading fear among the civilian population. Many people who were once sympathetic to those in hiding began to feel anxious, and some even betrayed their neighbors out of fear for their own safety. As David moved through the dense trees and underbrush, his heart raced with every rustle and whisper. He could hear the distant sounds of patrols in the area, their voices cutting through the stillness of the night like a chilling reminder of his precarious situation. Each time he heard footsteps or saw shadows, his instincts kicked in, and he ducked low, blending with the earth beneath him. The forests that had once felt like a refuge began to feel more threatening. David often worried about the people who had helped him. He knew that if the Gestapo caught even one of them, they could be forced to reveal his whereabouts. He carried this burden with him, knowing that his survival depended not only on his actions, but also on the choices of those around him. One night, while hiding in a small clearing, David overheard two men discussing the Gestapo's recent activities. They spoke in hushed tones about a nearby town where neighbors turned against one another. David felt a chill run down his spine as he listened. Trust was a fragile thing in such dark times, and he knew he had to stay alert and cautious. While he kept moving, David also tried to help others along the way. He encountered families in hiding who were scared and hungry. Despite his own circumstances, he often shared what little food he had, believing that kindness was just as vital for survival as stealth. Each interaction reminded him that they were all part of the same struggle. However, this constant state of alertness started to wear on David. The fatigue of living in fear was heavy, pulling at him as he navigated through the ever-changing landscape of danger. One evening, in a rare moment of solitude, he sat beneath the branches of an old oak tree. He took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill his lungs, but still, he felt an ache in his chest, not just from fear but from the weight of uncertainty. David understood that the next day could bring new challenges. He had learned to live one step at a time, but the tension was exhausting. Despite that, he refused to surrender. Each night spent exploring this treacherous world only fueled his determination to survive and make a difference. As dawn approached, casting a soft light through the trees, David felt a mix of hope and trepidation. He knew he had to keep moving, but he also wished for a moment of peace. He understood the importance of being alert, but he longed for a day when he could walk freely, without fear of the Gestapo or betrayal. The woods were unforgiving, a constant reminder of the dangers he faced, yet they also held the promise of freedom. With every careful step he took, David held onto the belief that one day, he would find a way to escape this nightmare and live life fully again. After weeks of evasion, David felt he had to take a risk. He sought the assistance of a local resistance group, a network of brave individuals who were dedicated to fighting against the Nazis. They operated in secrecy, helping those in need. When David approached them, he was filled with a mix of hope and fear. Would they help him? To his relief, they welcomed him warmly. They provided him with false papers, a crucial step that would help him blend in and avoid detection. With this newfound identity, David felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in a while. The resistance group also helped him find a safe refuge in a small village nearby, away from the chaos of the cities. The village was quiet and seemed peaceful on the surface. Small houses lined the streets, and the people gave off a sense of normalcy. David found himself feeling almost at home, surrounded by this tight-knit community. He was grateful for the kindness he received and appreciated the efforts of his new allies who made this safe haven possible. But the peace was short-lived. Just a few days after settling in, German soldiers began to sweep through the area, searching for anyone suspicious. Their presence filled the air with tension and fear. The village, once a refuge, now felt suffocating. David's heart sank as he heard rumors of raids and arrests. Each sound of boots marching echoed in his mind as a reminder of the danger. Knowing he had to be careful, David stayed close to home. He avoided drawing attention to himself, sticking to the shadows and blending in with the villagers. It was a delicate balance. He wanted to remain safe, but also needed to gather information. He listened intently when people spoke in the marketplace, picking up snippets of news and concerns among the locals. Every day felt like a game of survival. David's mind raced as he considered his options. He was thankful for the resistance group who had helped him, but now he felt exposed. The once comforting walls of the village began to feel like a trap, tightening around him as the soldiers patrolled the streets looking for anyone out of place. Despite the fear gripping him, David wasn't ready to give up. He found strength in the villagers who, despite the constant threat, continued to live their lives. They showed resilience, organizing community gatherings and supporting one another. This spirit inspired him, giving him hope that perhaps they could push back against the Nazi forces together. With the nights growing darker and the soldiers becoming bolder, David knew he had to act quickly. He started to meet secretly with members of the resistance group, discussing plans to help the village and gather information on the enemy's movements. Together, they worked hard, distributing food and supplies to those in need and creating small networks of support among the villagers. But with every passing day, the risk of discovery grew. David felt the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. While he wanted to protect the villagers, he didn't want to expose them to the violence that might come with an association to the resistance or to him. The fear of betrayal loomed large, reminding him that he remained in a precarious situation. As the soldiers continued their patrols, David remained determined. He understood that he couldn't hide forever. He had to find a way to turn the tide, to find a path forward that would keep himself and those he had come to care for safe. The struggle was far from over, but the spirit of resistance burned bright within him, guiding his next steps in this uncertain journey. In a twist of fate, David learned from whispers among the villagers that the soldiers were focused on capturing another prominent resistance leader named Samuel. News spread quickly that Samuel had been organizing efforts to undermine the Nazi presence, and the soldiers were determined to catch him. This information sent a shiver down David's spine, but it also sparked a sense of urgency within him. He saw this as a chance to slip away from the village, just when the soldiers' attention was diverted. Knowing this might be his best opportunity for escape, he felt a rush of adrenaline. Time was of the essence if he wanted to survive. That night, David gathered his things quietly, ensuring not to wake the others in the house where he had been hiding. He left a note for the family, thanking them for their kindness and support, and slipped into the shadows of the night. The moonlight barely peeked through the clouds, casting a soft glow on the path ahead. With careful steps, he moved toward the edge of the village, where the trees offered cover. As David made his way through the familiar forest paths, he felt a mix of fear and excitement. He knew the soldiers would be sweeping the village, their eyes fixed on finding Samuel, and he hoped they wouldn't think to look for him. Every snapping twig underfoot made his heart race, and he took deep, calming breaths to steady himself. The quiet of the woods felt comforting yet eerie, reminding him that danger was always nearby. Despite his anxiety, David took a moment to appreciate the forest. The trees loomed overhead, their leaves whispering in the gentle breeze, almost urging him to keep going. He had narrowly escaped capture before, but this felt different. With every step, he was moving toward freedom, away from the oppressive fear that had gripped him for so long. With determination in his heart, he reached a nearby stream, a landmark he had noted during his time in the village. He paused for a moment to gather his thoughts and assess the situation. Crossing the stream would help obscure his scent, and he wondered how far he could get before dawn. As he crossed, the cold water splashed against his legs, jolting him back to the urgency of his escape. He continued downriver, hugging the bank and staying close to the underbrush. He could still hear the distant sounds of the village waking up, but he reminded himself to focus on the path ahead. After what felt like hours of careful movement, David finally reached a more secluded area of the forest, where thick trees provided plenty of cover. He found a small hollow and laid low for a while, listening for any signs of soldiers or commotion in the distance. It was important to remain still and quiet until he was certain the coast was clear. As dawn began to break, birds started to sing, and the forest came alive with the promise of a new day. David took this moment of calm to reflect on his journey and everything he had endured. It wasn't just about escaping the soldiers. It was about finding the strength to keep moving forward and to hold on to hope in such dark times. With the sun rising, David felt a renewed sense of urgency. He knew he couldn't stay in one place for too long. The soldiers might eventually learn about his escape. Gathering his courage, he pushed deeper into the forest, driven by the knowledge that freedom was still within his reach. He would continue to seek refuge until he found a place where he could finally feel safe. With only a few days left until a major operation was scheduled to bring more German troops into the area, David knew he had to make a final push toward safety. The urgency of his situation weighed on him heavily. He could feel the clock ticking. He needed to escape before it was too late. Determined not to let fear hold him back, David set out early one morning. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a warm light over the trees. He navigated through the forest with purpose, each step taking him further away from the threat that loomed behind him. He had heard whispers about the neighboring countries, places where people were offering asylum to those fleeing the horrors of war. As he moved closer to the borders, David kept a lookout for the signs that would guide him to safety. He was cautious, knowing that patrols could be anywhere. He felt a mix of hope and anxiety, hope for the possibility of freedom, but anxiety about the dangers still ahead. After several hours of walking, he reached a small path that seemed less traveled. It led him toward a stream that would guide him across the border. Taking a deep breath, he crossed, grateful for the cold water that reminded him he was still alive and fighting for his future. The gentle rush of the stream felt like a promise of something better. David pressed on, determined to reach the other side. The forest began to thin out, and he could feel a shift in the air. He knew he was getting closer to safety, but the tension in his chest remained. He stayed low and moved quietly, careful to avoid any sounds that might attract attention. With every step, he imagined what it would be like to be free from the constant worry of being hunted. As he nearing the border, he could see a small village nestled among the hills. It looked peaceful, a stark contrast to the turmoil he had experienced. Hope surged within him. He thought about possibly finding help there. Yet, he remained cautious. He had learned that not everyone could be trusted. When he finally entered the village, he felt a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. The streets were filled with people going about their daily lives, unaware of the shadows lurking just out of sight. David hoped to blend in, to be just another face in the crowd, but he knew that if anyone recognized him, it could be disastrous. He approached a shopkeeper, an older woman with kind eyes. David managed to muster the courage to ask for directions, keeping his voice steady. The woman looked at him for a moment, as if she could sense his anxiety, then pointed him toward a nearby inn that was rumored to offer refuge for those in need. Thanking her, David hurried away, careful not to draw attention. He made his way to the inn, where he hoped he could find a safe place to rest and perhaps connect with someone who could help him apply for asylum. The inn was warm and welcoming, a stark difference from his recent experiences. Inside, he noticed a few other weary travelers, their faces wearing the marks of hardship. They were all seeking something, just like him. David felt a glimmer of hope again. Maybe this time he would find safety. As he approached the innkeeper, he thought about all he had endured to get here. His heart raced with anticipation, but he also knew the risks were far from over. He needed to remain vigilant while he waited for a chance to secure his freedom. The relentless hunt was still out there, but for now, he had taken the first step towards a new beginning.